What if the most powerful protest wasn't loud but silent? What if one woman slow walked through a park, unraveled decades of bias in a single breath? This is not a story of shouts. It's a story of stillness that forced a city to see. Stay with us because by the end you'll understand why they could never erase her name. Dear viewer, what you are about to witness is not just a story. It is a powerful testament to the quiet power and pursuit of justice in places most people ignore. If this is your first time here, I warmly invite you to share where you are watching in the comments below. And if stories like this move you, challenge you, or make you think, consider subscribing and clicking the bell icon. We share voices that deserve to be heard every day. Thank you for being here. Now, let's get into the story. The early morning sun in Savannah, Georgia, cast long shadows across the cobblestones, bathing the city's oak-lined streets in a soft golden glow. Among those shadows moved a figure so unassuming that many would have looked right through her, the 80-year-old black woman, known to locals as Ms. Evelyn Harper. She pushed her walker with slow, deliberate movements, her left leg stiff from a stroke she endured 5 years ago. Neatly pinned to her lavender cardigan was a small button reading, "I remember a reminder that her presence in that city was more than incidental, it was testament." Evelyn had walked that same route for decades, leaving her modest brick home each morning to visit the little park across from Forsyth Fountain. Beneath the sprawling oak, a bronze plaque honored her late brother, a Corinthian high hero and community mentor. She touched it gently each day, whispering his name, Samuel. She admitted to no one that in those fleeting seconds their souls connected in silent conversation. But this Sunday felt different. The air seemed charged with something she couldn't name, though she felt it in every step. As Evelyn approached the fountain, its water shimmered like liquid crystals beneath the sunshine. She straightened, steadied herself, and inhaled deeply. The aroma of magnolia blossoms drifted through the square. She'd known every stone, every crack in the pavement, every bench since childhood. Here, her voice felt rooted safe. If she were honest, she hated that she needed a walker now, but each wheel ball under its legs symbolized her survival. And with survival came purpose. She paused, adjusting her scarf, a faded rose-colored wrap her granddaughter had knitted. In the near distance, she caught sight of a police cruiser, an unmarked sedan parked at the curb. Officer David Collins stepped out, radio in hand. He was new to the Savannah PD, transfer from Atlanta, just 8 months on the force. He was fit early 30s with a disciplined posture and the confidence of someone trained to observe. But what he observed made his lips tighten slightly. Evelyn's slow pace, her careful leaning on the walker, and the way she scanned the benches with no one else around, everything whispered suspicion. He activated his mic. Unit 3. We have a possible loiterer, elderly female walking with a device. His tone was neutral, almost bored, but his finger lingered near the radio button. He walked toward her. "Ma'am, park's closed today," he called softly, but firmly. Evelyn lifted her chin and met his gaze. "It's Sunday. Parks open Sundays." Her voice was calm, husky, like a tree that's been bending through storms for decades but never broke. Collins's jaw clenched. "I don't see any signs saying otherwise." He looked around at the empty benches, the muted fountain, the broom that lay near the sidewalk. "You gotta understand that sometimes folks get hurt after hours." She swallowed. "I was taught to be mindful, not fearful." She said this without accusation. She simply stated truth. Collins cleared his throat. ID, please. Evelyn placed her hands gently on the walker, shifted, took a slow breath. My granddaughter's expecting soon, she finally said. She's with me to see that plaque to remember him. She pointed toward the plaque under the oak, where her brother's name glinted. Collins followed her gesture. He paused, hesitated a moment longer than he should have. Miss Harper? Her voice bore quiet strength, each syllable shaped by years of speaking truth into spaces that didn't want to hear it. He nodded. Even this hesitant acknowledgement felt heavy. Let me just check your ID. With surprising speed, Evelyn retrieved her wallet from the walker pouch. She took out 2 laminated cards, a volunteer badge for the Savannah Civil Rights Heritage Project, and a faded hospital card proclaiming her 50 years of service as a union nurse in the civil rights era. She placed them gently on the arm of her walker. Collins's posture shifted. Information met surprise. Respect flickered in his eyes. Then he nodded and said, I'm sorry, quickly but sincerely. He looked away momentarily, as if the heat of realization had rusted his throat. Evelyn gazed at him, unblinking. I belong here, she said, voice soft, but carrying across the silent park. You belong, she continued, pulling her badge from her wallet and pressing it into his palm. Legacy is more than age or race. He stared at it, a volunteer vestige of battles fought long ago, stories documented in archives, voices preserved in hushed recordings. His eyes were distant now, as if he was suddenly seeing her for the first time. Evelyn turned and resumed her slow, dignified walk toward the oak. Collins watched. He didn't chase after her. Instead, he watched until she disappeared behind the fountain and the magnolias. Around them, the park buzzed back to life. Joggers appeared, coffee cups clinked at nearby tables, and tourists drifted across Forsyth's lawn, oblivious to the quiet reckoning that had just passed there. But for Collins, something had changed. Under his breath, he repeated her last words, legacy is more than age or race. He pressed his fingers together as if recalling their weight in his hand. He reached for his radio and called off the alert, wrongful suspicion. All clear. Evelyn behind the oak rested her hand on the plaque, closed her eyes. She whispered her brother's name again, gently. Still rising, Sam. We're still rising. In that moment, when shadows parted to let quiet strength shine, neither new wave nor old wounds obscured the truth. And in that unbroken silence, the world around them started to tilt. The afternoon sun in Forsyth Park had begun its slow descent, turning the magnolia leaves a deeper shade of gold as Ms. Evelyn Harper made her return. Her steps, once tentative in the morning, now carried a quiet confidence, each movement a testament to survival, to memory, to purpose. She paused beneath the oak's fingertips, brushing the worn edges of the bronze plaque that honored her brother Samuel. It was in those moments, alone in the hush, that her heart felt the weight of every story she had safeguarded, of every injustice she had witnessed unravel. Word had spread of the morning's encounter. Nearby bench chatter softened as joggers slowed, pulling earbuds aside. A young man holding a violin case watched her approach. A mother with a stroller paused to offer a respectful nod. Without knowing why, they all felt compelled to honor her presence. Evelyn didn't seek their acknowledgement, yet she welcomed it, not for herself, but as a sign that history, even when threatened, could still be honored. Officer David Collins remained nearby, almost inconspicuously. He studied the pattern of light and leaf that danced across her lavender sweater, and he thought of his own grandmother, who had raised him with stories of sacrifice from another part of Georgia. In that recognition, something shifted. This wasn't just protocol, it was legacy. It was memory demanding respect. Collins approached slowly, careful not to bring back the tension of the morning. "Ms. Harper," he began, voice soft with apology. I, I wanted to thank you for your patience today." She looked up, amber eyes, steady but warm. "You're learning," she said, leaving the words open. No accusation, only space for growth. The respect that followed wasn't forced. It arrived in moments and gestures, in acknowledgement. He cleared a fallen leaf from the plaque's edge. "He was a hero," Collins said quietly. "You must be so proud." Tears glimmered in Evelyn's eyes, though her voice remained calm. "He was more than my pride. He was my guide." And now she touched the plaque. "His legacy lives in every walk I take." Their exchange drew a small audience. A college student pressed record. An older gentleman in a Civil War reenactor's uniform offered a respectful salute. A group of children watched from the playground across the path. Respect from generations apart converged here. Evelyn turned toward the children, voice moving with gentle insistence. "Remember, this standing still isn't weakness. It's witness. It's weight. And it's where change begins." She then began to recite offhandedly a poem her brother had taught her decades ago. The poem spoke of roots and rivers, of quiet endurance, and of the power in stillness. Each word hung in the hush, rippling across the park's late afternoon calm. Collins closed his eyes briefly, feeling the echo. When she finished, he nodded with intention. "Would you allow me to help you cross to the main path?" he asked. His offer was a sign of deeper respect, one earned not assumed. Evelyn hesitated for a heartbeat, and then she placed a hand on his arm. Together, they walked side by side. They passed beneath the oak's branching shade toward the park's ornate gates. Along the way, Collins noticed small things: Evelyn's walker well worn, in places the miniature charm of her lavender dress, the quiet dignity in her posture. He realized how quick he had been to mistake presence for threat, how little awareness he'd had of history living among them. As they exited, Collins stopped and said, "I've spoken to the chief. We're adding a training session on history, on dignity, on presence." Evelyn's smile was soft but firm. "That's a start. But the real change comes when people see respect as their own responsibility." He nodded, as if he'd just inherited a promise. Evelyn raised her hand in farewell, and the students, the joggers, the violinist all turned to watch. The park fell into respectful quiet for a moment, a collective breath, acknowledging what had transpired. Shadows moved across the lawn, weaving respect between sun and leaf. Evelyn Harper resumed her morning pilgrimage. Behind her, the park carried the sound of footsteps, and something else, a shift. A quiet echo of respect that would linger long after she returned home. The morning light filtered through the live oaks of Forsyth Park, casting a dappled mosaic across the narrow walking path as Evelyn Harper resumed her daily ritual. Journalists had assembled outside her garden, but she refused to let their lenses dictate her steps. Today, her presence had more weight than cameras. She sensed it in the quiet that seemed to ripple through the air, an echo of authority, long unacknowledged, now recognized. She paused near the fountain's edge and lifted a slender finger to trace the carved patterns where time had softened the stone. Back when she began her work, documenting civil rights testimonies, such fountains were meeting points where voices gathered and hope began to stir. Evelyn closed her eyes and remembered the power of truth spoken in courage. In that hush, She felt authority not imposed, but grounded in lived experience and earned respect. Officer David Collins crouched behind a statue of a poet studying Evelyn from a distance. The training session he had promised after the park encounter was underway, and he had insisted on being the first to approach her today, not as an investigator, but as a student. He carried a leather-bound notebook filled with reflections and questions. Evelyn began walking again, her walker making soft tracks on the gravel. Collins followed at a respectful distance until she entered a small clearing near the magnolia grove. She halted and allowed herself to stand unassisted for a long moment. The breeze held the scent of blossoms, and for a heartbeat, Forsyth Park felt timeless, an intersection between past and present injustice and permission. Collins stepped forward with deliberate calm. "Ms. Harper," he said, voice hushed. She turned her eyes steady even before she spoke. "Good morning, Officer Collins. Have you come to listen?" He nodded. "Yes, ma'am. I and the department want to understand your authority, what it truly means to carry dignity in your steps." He opened his notebook, revealing lines of carefully written thoughts. He read softly, authority rooted in history, presence as protection, silence not as submission, but as declaration. Evelyn watched, observing every gesture, his earnestness, his humility, his willingness to absorb rather than impose. "You're on the right track," she said gently. "Authority isn't given. It's built. It's earned through action over decades, through love for humanity, not fear of consequence." Collins swallowed and glanced down at the notebook. "I thought respect would come from rank. I thought uniforms and badges would carry weight. Now I see how they can carry prejudice, if unearned, if unexamined." Evelyn nodded. "Your uniform signals responsibility, but the louder voice is lived truth. Mine came from archiving the cries of children being hosed. It came from translating injustice into records impossible to erase. That echoes across time, across spaces. That's authority." Around them, joggers slowed not out of obligation, but instinct. A bride's photo shoot paused as the photographer lowered her camera. The park seemed to lean forward, waiting for Evelyn's next words. "It's easy to mistake stillness for weakness," she said, "to see a walker and assume frailty. But authority isn't in muscle. It's in memory, in story. If someone thinks you don't belong, it means they've forgotten to look beyond the surface." Collins scribbled. "Look beyond the surface." He paused, then added quietly, "Make assumptions visible." Evelyn offered a soft smile. "Exactly." They walked side by side toward the magnolia grove, where a small group of civic leaders gathered under her invitation. Collins had arranged this meeting. Church leaders, park rangers, activists, neighborhood watch organizers. He hoped to begin a conversation rooted in reverence, not reaction. Evelyn stood before them, fragile in appearance, but unshakable in stance. She introduced Collins first, noting his openness to accountability. He nodded, cheeks flushed. She then summarized their shared encounter, the assumptions that nearly removed her dignity the moment that became an opportunity to learn. She spoke in calm cadences, each word measured, yet powerful. The group listened with rapt attention. A pastor shifted on her feet. A park ranger wiped her brow. A neighborhood leader clasped and unclasped his hands. The story touched them because it wasn't abstract. It was immediate. It wasn't distant. It was personal. It wasn't about blame. It was about responsibility. Evelyn spoke next, about echoes of authority, how authority's aftershocks ripple through young officers in training rooms, through citizens in public spaces, through institutions charged with protection. If our institutions base authority on suspicion, they infringe upon the dignity they're meant to uphold. We must rewrite that echo she declared. From suspicion to stewardship, from fear to facilitation, from silence to solidarity. An activist raised a hand asking how to translate those ideals into policy. Evelyn replied, "Start with interaction, with listening, with documenting what happened and how it changed you. Train officers to know the names of elders on their beat. Encourage them to learn stories, not just statutes." She turned to Collins. He's committed to initiating that within his precinct. Collins spoke next, voice steady. "I propose monthly, walk and listens. Officers walk the park with residents not as patrol, but as participants. We'll gather stories, meet people, record their presence." Nods and murmurs followed. Eyes met and understood. Respect was building in real time. Evelyn concluded, authority without awareness isn't authority, it's assumption. But authority grounded in shared history can change culture. It resonates beyond one person. It echoes across communities. The sun climbed higher. The park came alive again. Their circle dispersed, but the echo stayed. Collins returned to Evelyn and said thank you, not just for sharing, but for trusting. She smiled and touched his forearm. Trust is fragile, and today you honored it. They parted as the sounds of Forsyth Park resumed children's laughter birdsong conversation. But something beneath the surface had shifted. The echoes of authority no longer trembled with suspicion. They rang with recognition, with promise. As Evelyn turned to continue her walk, Collins began scribbling again. Not notes this time, but plans the first whispers of policy grounded in dignity. And in that quiet, the true transformative power of presence moved from stillness into action. The light that filtered into the old community center in Forsyth Park wasn't just sunlight, it was memory, echo, and resolve. Evelyn Harper, 78, and deliberate with every breath she took, sat before her desk, surrounded by quiet. The soft creak of her walker rested near the window, as if standing guard over the words she was about to write. Today wasn't just another morning. It was the day she would try to translate a lifetime of witnessing, of silence, of strength, into something that could not be overlooked. The world now knew her name, but that had never been her intention. Her face caught mid-sentence in a viral video had become a symbol of the uneasy truth America still struggled to confront. But Evelyn wasn't writing for recognition. She was writing because the system that mistook her stillness for suspicion had no blueprint for how to see someone like her before judging. And that had to change. She began with a story, not a directive, in memory of a child she once interviewed, small, afraid with the eyes of someone already too familiar with injustice. She wrote about that child's voice, how it trembled but didn't break, how even at 7 years old, he had understood what it meant to not be seen fully. That memory was her foundation. From there, she began to shape a guide, not a legal document, but something softer, more powerful, a way forward. Evelyn wrote with the clarity of someone who had survived too long to romanticize struggle. She believed change didn't begin in courtrooms or with protests alone. It began in how we paused, how we allowed ourselves to look again, to unlearn assumptions. She imagined moments of hesitation, not out of fear, but from reflection. She imagined officers who took a breath, who asked themselves hard questions before stepping into a space that wasn't theirs. not to assert control, but to recognize the lives already rooted there. She remembered stories from her archival work, where women tucked truth into song, where men passed wisdom like folded notes beneath threats. She poured those lessons into her writing, crafting not rules, but rituals of mutual care, a kind of community rhythm where introductions meant something, where knowing someone's name wasn't a formality, but a form of safety. In Evelyn's vision, neighborhoods didn't have to prove their worth to be protected. She wanted parks filled with names, not just patrols. She wanted elders to walk with their heads high, not wondering whether dignity required permission. And she wanted the stillness, the same stillness that had once been mistaken for threat to become a new kind of signal. One that meant you are seen, you are safe, you are sacred. By afternoon, a quiet gathering had formed. Those who had once walked past Evelyn now walked with her. Young officers listened closely, taking notes not out of duty, but desire. Community leaders nodded humbled. And as Evelyn read aloud passages of her work, there were no applause breaks, only silence. The kind of silence that meant something was shifting. She finished with a story, one her husband once told her long before he died. A blueprint, he said, isn't just lines on a page. It's hope in architecture. Evelyn looked out the window, as if searching for him in the light. I'm just building hope, she said quietly, brick by brick. That night when she returned home, the draft remained on her table. She didn't email it, didn't call the press. She let it rest, knowing the right eyes would find it. The right hearts would carry it. Because she hadn't written it to be famous. She'd written it to be followed. And the next morning, as she stepped once more into the sunlit park with her walker tapping gently along the path, there was a bench, newly painted, a plaque newly placed. It bore no grand title, just her name, and the words she had once whispered into a tape recorder when no one thought they mattered. Let presence be power. Let stillness speak. The bench stood quietly beneath the sycamore, its new coat of paint already starting to soften beneath the early summer sun. Just above the grain of the wood, a small brass plaque caught the morning light. No grand words, no ornamental flourishes, just a name, Evelyn Harper. And beneath it, a single line, she remembered so we wouldn't forget. For days after the video swept the nation, Evelyn had chosen silence. Not because she had nothing to say, but because she had said it in every careful step, every word she had preserved, every archive she had built. She knew the noise would fade. Headlines would shift. Outrage would be replaced by another incident, another story. But if something real were to remain, it had to be rooted in memory, not reaction. In the days that followed, people came not to gawk, not for spectacle, but to sit. The bench had become a place of pause. A young teacher brought her third-grade class there and asked them what they thought courage looked like. A retired nurse left a bouquet of lilies every Sunday morning. A high school boy, who once believed history was just dates in a book, now sat there after class, writing in a leather journal his grandmother had given him. Evelyn herself rarely spoke of the moment that had made her known. She preferred to talk about the time she helped preserve the letters from Selma, or the summer she interviewed a woman who had been jailed for praying on courthouse steps. She told stories that hadn't gone viral because those were the ones people needed most. The stories that didn't demand to be heard but needed to be remembered. One afternoon, a reporter asked her, "What do you want your legacy to be?" She smiled gently. "Legacy is for the living to build," she said. "I just want them to keep asking better questions, about who they see, about why they assume, about who they overlook. By the time the city unveiled the training reform named in her honor, Evelyn had already returned to her quiet life. No ribbon cutting, no press, just a walk through Franklin Park, as she'd done for years, with a slower gait and deeper peace. And though Officer Merriman never returned to the beat, he sent a letter. Short, no excuses, just acknowledgement. I didn't see you, and I should have. I'm learning now, because of you. It was enough. Not because it fixed everything, but because it showed that something had shifted, that someone somewhere was starting to understand. Evelyn Harper didn't need monuments or museums. She had the park, the plaque, the presence. Her name would never be erased, not because it had been carved into wood or brass, but because she had written it onto the soul of a city. And every time someone paused before that bench, every time a child asked, "Who was Evelyn Harper?" justice breathed a little easier. In the gentle hush of Franklin Park, Evelyn Harper's story found its quiet crescendo, not in courtrooms, not in televised interviews, but in the everyday pauses of ordinary lives. Her journey began with a moment that could have been forgotten. A retired black woman, 78, walking with the cautious grace of age and ailment, met with suspicion by a uniformed officer relying on instinct, not awareness. Evelyn's encounter with Officer Merriman was not loud or violent, but its tremors rippled far beyond the park bench. She was overlooked, assumed dangerous because of the color of her skin and the slow cadence of her steps. In that instant, she could have retreated, but instead, she stood firm. That stillness became her voice. What unfolded next was a national reckoning. A single snapshot of Evelyn's composed resistance spread across social media, and news outlets disrupting our habitual assumptions about safety race and respect. In her refusal to plead her refusal to shrivel under suspicion, Evelyn reframed the narrative. She showed us that dignity is inherent, that presence is not permission. And in doing so, she invited us to do better, not because she demanded it, but because she embodied it. As the story progressed, we saw an unfolding alliance between memory and action. The park bench itself, ordinary in shape, but transformed by a simple plaque, became a living monument to reflection, not triumph. Children gathered to ask what courage looked like. Veterans left notes. Teachers brought students to experience history with their own eyes. Evelyn Harper's name became a refrain, a reminder that justice isn't always delivered by laws alone. It is upheld by collective recognition. But perhaps the most powerful transformation was within Officer Merriman. He reached out, not seeking absolution, but offering acknowledgement. "I didn't see you, and I should have," he wrote. In those 9 words, a fracture in assumption became a bridge toward awareness. It showed that accountability begins when we're willing to say, "I was wrong," and learn from it. Evelyn didn't demand his apology. She simply welcomed it when it came. That, too, was a lesson. Forgiveness is stronger when rooted in mutual growth, not forced absolution. And the city heard her stillness. Training modules were rewritten. Park authorities created quiet spaces for reflection. Civil rights groups amplified her archives. Evelyn Harper's legacy wasn't built on spectacle. It was etched in systems and curricula, in quiet dialogues beneath sycamores and classroom ceilings. She rewrote not just procedures, but the narrative arc of what justice requires: curiosity, empathy, recognition. So what can we carry forward from Evelyn Harper's story into our own lives? First, awareness matters. It's easy to feel righteous when we hold a badge, a title, or a belief in our own virtue. But true justice happens when we ask ourselves, who am I overlooking? Why am I assuming Evelyn didn't ask for respect? She demanded attention, and attention requires intention. Second dignity is not earned, it is remembered. When we treat someone's quiet dignity as a threat, we reveal our own unawareness. What if we chose to honor presence over performance, to value calm as courage, not cowardice? Evelyn walked slowly, but her pace held more power than the rush of ignorance. Third, accountability means embracing discomfort. Officer Merriman's letter wasn't mandated, it was earned. It came from recognizing that bias is not a flaw, it's human. What matters is willingness to confront it, to learn, and to change. Each of us encounters moments, minor or monumental, where we can choose humility over hubris. Fourth, legacy is built in everyday structures. Evelyn's influence through archives, plaques, training modules was less about being lauded and more about embedding lessons into civic life. Our own legacies start similarly in how we treat the cashier. Who's different? The child overlooked, the stranger slowed by age or ability. Every encounter can be the seed of deeper justice. To bring these lessons home, look again when you feel certain. If something or someone seems out of place, pause and ask why. Stand still, even when it's easier to perform. Your dignity may be the catalyst for someone else's awakening. Say I'm sorry, even when it's hard. Admitting ignorance bridges suspicion and understanding. Embed respect in your day, whether at work, at school, in your community. Teach others what it means to truly see someone. We're not asking for viral moments. We're asking for quiet revolutions in classrooms, in traffic stops, in everyday encounters. It starts when one person chooses recognition over assumption. It grows when others follow. If Evelyn Harper's story stirred something in you, if it made you wince or weep or wonder, please don't let that feeling slip away. Share this video. Leave a comment about what stood out to you. Tell us where you watched from and how you'll remember Evelyn's stillness in your own life. And if stories like this matter to you, stories that hold up a mirror to our shared prejudices, that celebrate unspoken dignity, that remind us how small actions can shift systems, then subscribe and ring the bell. You'll be part of a community committed to listening, learning, and living with more awareness. Your support isn't a statistic, it's the spark that keeps storytellers going, keeps truth-seeking alive. Because better worlds aren't built on noise, they're built on presence. And it all begins with one person who refuses to shrink. Let Evelyn Harper's story be more than an echo. Let it be a pulse, a quiet, steady heartbeat that begins with you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for watching. And thank you for helping make sure no story of such courage goes unheard or unremembered.